Well, hello everyone, and thanks for jumping online with us. If we haven't had the chance to meet before, my name is Joe. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace, and excited for our weekend together. A couple things just to get things started. If you text or message me personally, so you can find me at Joe Caruso on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. If you can find me and message me the keyword ice cream, I'll get you a gift card for some ice cream. But it is so good to be with you as we head into the summer full go. It is going to be a great season. I'm excited for this series. It's just going to be an awesome time together. And I know I say those kind of things a lot, but I always mean them. I just really feel like God is going to meet us here as a church and as individuals right here in this summer as we try to do everything we can to know Him, to honor Him, and to help others know who He is. So this is camp season, so lots of camps going on. This is also Go Team season, so we have a lot of missions trips happening this summer, and excited about all of those. So be praying about all of those because God does some incredible work on those weeks. There's something about those dedicated weeks, that time away where we're kind of removing ourselves from some of our normal responsibilities and normal stressors, and actually just focusing then on how would God have us interact with Him? How would God have us interact with each other? How would God have us to learn about what it means to serve and love other people? And so be praying for those camps and for those trips as they really get into full swing here this summer. Now, one of the things that's just been really on my heart is where are you at? How are you doing? Are you accidentally kind of just going with the flow and allowing life to kind of almost like a lazy river, right? Like you kind of get back in that raft and you just kind of allow the river to take you where it's going, or are we more in a canoe where, God's got life moving, but we're paddling and we're allowing ourselves to kind of navigate how He's taking us and what's going on. I just want to encourage you this summer to not be in the lazy river, to jump in, grab the paddle, and see what God wants to do in your life. And maybe this is a great chance to get connected or reconnected and to find that group or to find that place to serve and really begin to watch your life change as you're helping someone else's life. Maybe this is the season to really dig into a good book and learn more about the character of God, or to finally read through the Gospels in the New Testament. But let's utilize the summer, right? Like whatever those nice weather mornings, and you grab that book outside, or you grab a friend and you get to know them, or you allow someone to disciple you, or you invest in someone else. I just really want to encourage you to take advantage of this summer as it comes and moves along. One of the things I'm excited about this summer is we take an annual family vacation. I get to go with my in-laws. We've been doing this now ever since I've been a part of their family, and we head down to the Outer Banks. And we almost always do this in the off season, but this year we're doing it in the summer. And so it's going to be a lot hotter than normal, and it's also going to be a lot busier than normal. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what that's all about. I'm not sure I can remember a busy time at the beach, maybe even in my lifetime. And so I'm both excited and a little bit nervously curious to see how that plays out. If you're going anywhere, we'd love to know about that. And of course, you can always stay connected with us online while you're out of town. It's one of my favorite things to turn on the screen while I'm out of town and see some version of this. Maybe sometimes it's just the way the timing works. I get to watch myself, welcome myself on screen, but it is really good to just have that as a resource. But the overall thing that I think I want to just continue to encourage is take advantage of the season and the time that God has in front of you. We're not promised anything. Now, one of the fun initiatives that we have moving on this summer, an opportunity for all of us, is actually our summer passport. A lot of times I get questions all the time about how can I help people, how can I serve, how can I be about helping people understand who Jesus is. And so we put together this resource. If you're in the buildings at all this summer, you can pick one up, or you can go to bath.gracechurches.org/passport. And if you can download it there and check those things out. Some of the events you can get stamped, some of them you can fill in yourself. And then we have some fun things at the end of the summer that we can celebrate with if you decide to navigate that passport this summer. On top of, I think we'll make some really big splashes and big waves if we make that stuff happen. Well, we're going to be in this great conversation today. I'm excited to continue to discover more and more about what God is like. I'm excited for us to continue to grow more and more with Him. So let's grab that, cup of lemonade or whatever it is that you're going to settle in with. Let's try to put the distractions aside. Excuse me, and let's lock in to some time when we can worship with God, that we can learn from Him, and that we can be more connected not only to who He is, but also to His people. So it's great to be with you through the screen. Hope to see you sometime in person soon. And I love that we're going to be able to do this. So let's go ahead and hop in the room. We'll have a great weekend together.
Well, hey, Grace Church, just wanted to touch base with you again. Miss you guys. Been on the road here for the last couple of weeks. Last week we were at Access Conference, meeting with other churches and leaders from across the world. And this week I'm coming to you directly from Momentum Youth Conference. So we have about 2,000 teenagers and youth leaders that are gathered here with us on a college campus in Indiana, and we're having a great weekend with them. What we do is we gather these guys together, we share the love of Jesus with them, we also try to speak vision into their lives about what God could do through them and how He could use them in ministry as well as the marketplace. So we have big sessions where they hear world-class speakers, and then lots and lots of community where the kids are hanging out, getting quality time with their youth leaders and the youth workers, and then with each other. And it just creates an environment that is a real spiritual catalyst in their life. So thanks for letting us do this. It's a big investment on the part of Grace Church. We bring literally youth ministries from all across the United States that are part of this, and God uses it in great, great ways. It's a fun week. You can't have more fun than hanging out with teenagers for a week, and your heart and your investment's a big part of it. So I miss you. I look forward to seeing you soon, but be praying for us that God works through and in our students' lives in big ways.
So that's awesome. That's a big part of our summer for our high schoolers. I know it's always life-changing each year when we send our students out there, but people from all across the country are a part of that. And so it's a really fun week. Those students are coming back this weekend. And so maybe you have a high schooler out on that trip, or you know a few. Debrief with them when they come back and hear what God taught them, what they got out of the week. And just looking forward to continuing to invest in students and kids this summer. Just special opportunities we have to do that. Welcome out to Grace too if you're our guest. So glad that you would choose to make this part of your weekend. My name's Josh. I'm one of our pastors here. And we've got a really fun weekend planned. Excited to get into that. But before we do, a great way for you to get the most out of the service today, if you don't have it yet already, download our app. Just search for Grace Ohio in the App Store, and then go there to the Bath campus. It's really helpful to have there when we're kind of getting to the conversation today, or if you want to know what songs the band's doing, or if you have kids and students, ways they can be involved in the weekend as well. There's more to Grace Church than just the weekend as well. Actually, in just a couple weeks, we're going to have our Bible camp the first week of August, when literally hundreds of kids are going to come from our community to be a part of that week. It's an amazing time to tell them about Jesus, to have fun. If you are interested in volunteering, I encourage you to sign up, but specifically, if you have kids or you know of kids, if they live next door to you, you have grandkids, you have nieces, nephews, invite them out to be a part of that, because we put a ton of thought and intention into that, and it's a blast. It's one of the life-changing moments for our young kids who are going to be a part of that here in just a few weeks. And then also, too, maybe you've heard about our sports camps. We've got 1 week left of those. That's going to be this coming week, and so there'll be kids from the community, leaders, counselors, kind of working with them all day. And so we share all this with you because maybe you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. You know, you're not a fifth grader going to Ninja Warrior camp. You're not out on momentum. But these are opportunities for God to work in our church in kind of a different way than just here on the stage or just here even kind of on the weekend. And so pray for that, or if you know kids who would benefit from that and could be a part of it, I would encourage you to point them to that because it really is an amazing week and love getting to invest in these kids and students. And so we're going to finish up the series we've been in called What Does God Actually Want? But before we do that, the band's going to lead us in some songs.
Well, hey, everyone, I invite you to stand up. Let's sing together. love the truth of that and the finality of it. That there is nothing that our God can't do. Apologies for the double negative, but there is nothing that our God can't do. And that word nothing, the finality of it, right? Nothing. It reminds me of a verse that's in the Bible, and it says, what can separate us from the love of God? And it starts to list some of the things. Heights, depths, things on the earth, outside of the earth. And it says all of these things, but it says nothing can separate us from the love of God. And so I'm loving hearing that word, nothing, and knowing that there is nothing above or below that can take the place of the Lord. Nothing that can separate us from his love. And when we believe that way, we can start believing that he is for us, that he walks with us, and that we can trust in him in all things, in all experiences, in all situations, good and bad. And so this next song that we're going to sing talks about life will have troubles, but in all those ways, we have a firm foundation that is found in Jesus Christ alone. So let's hold on to those truths and those promises as we sing this one together. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Everything around me is shaking. Oh, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength. 'Cause I put my life on Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Everything around me is shaking. Oh, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. Sing this together with me. You came and went. My house was built on you. Safe with you, I'm gonna make it. My house was built on you. Safe inheritance.
Well, hey everyone, it's great to be together again, so thanks for being here. And thank you if you're watching online or if you're over at our Montrose location. It's great to kind of be walking through this series together. We've been talking about this conversation, what does God actually want? And so that's been an interesting question to walk through. But what we've been looking at is kind of this teaching moment with Jesus. Sometimes we call it the Sermon on the Mount, but it's this all one moment where Jesus is talking with a crowd of people. And he's teaching these things that he probably didn't just say one time, but as he interacted with people and taught from the town and village to village, these were the kinds of things he said. And they're difficult, challenging. You have to think about it a little bit. And what he knows about his audience and what's true of us even today is that we kind of all have a preconceived idea about how to answer this question, right? What does God actually want? And so we might answer that one way. In his day, kind of the dominant worldview was shaped by what we call the Jewish law. So he was talking to Jewish people, and they had this law kind of given to them from God, written through by the prophets and kind of throughout their time as a people group. And that was what very much dictated their worldview, kind of their social norms, their political views, obviously their kind of religious outlook on life, and that was kind of the world he was entering into, was they had their minds shaped by this, and they were supposed to find the heart of God, the story of God in that. But as kind of time went on, it began to drift, and people began to offer their own commentary, and kind of it began to get confused and blurry. And so what Jesus is doing kind of at the beginning of this talk, he says, I've come not to abolish the law. I'm not here to like toss it out and start over. I'm here to accomplish it. I'm here to fulfill it. I'm here to bring it back to the heart of God, and I'm here not just to tell you about it, but I'm here to embody it. I'm here to live it out. And so what we kind of know about the law, we said this first week of the series, is that it revealed what true love was. Because that's who God is. That's what we were created for. But it didn't just reveal or explain what true love was. It also exposed the reality of our relationships and how love should play out or how it fails to play out. And Jesus is kind of entering that conversation, and there's several points along the way. He kind of has this repeated pattern where he says, you've heard it said, right, in kind of your Jewish worldview, the Jewish law, God's word, but I tell you this. And again, he's not creating something new. He's really challenging at the heart level. He's bringing it back to the wisdom and the truth and the reality of what love is. So he talks about murder and adultery and divorce and lying and revenge. And so these have not been easy conversations to preach them, I'm sure, for Jesus' audience to wrestle through that. But what's so important about this, right, as probably these aren't like the feel-good messages of the Bible, but there's something here. There's something that Jesus wants us to understand about God's love through these love challenges. And so it's probably hard to think through all this. It's probably challenging to our lives at an individual level for us as a church, but there's something important here that Jesus is settling into because he wants us to deeper understand God's love. He expects us to live these things out. And so as we dive into that, as we kind of pick up this final love challenge, we'll be in Matthew 5. You can open that up in the app, or you can open that up in your Bibles, go to Matthew 5. And this is kind of the end of this teaching moment on radical love. And he says this, that you have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And it continues on. He says, in that way you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven, for he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. Can you move it on for me a little bit? It's not working for me. No? Tech people? Yeah, good. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. You can see why these aren't the feel-good parts of the Bible, right? These aren't like the coffee mug scriptures. You're not like, oh, I'm waking up this morning with a cup of coffee, and it's like, I'm going to love my enemy today and just have a little sip of coffee during my devotions. Like, this is hard. And then he lands, and he's like, by the way, just be perfect. And you're like, okay, Jesus, what are you saying? Like, I don't know if you've read these parts of the Bible, and you're like, this is like uncomfortable, and he can't possibly mean that, but maybe he does. Like, I know I don't take Jesus very seriously that often, but like, I think he's being for real here, and he just keeps bringing it, amplifying it more and more. And it's challenging because it's challenging for two reasons. One, there are a lot of people that annoy me, and there are a lot of people that bother me. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that as a pastor, but hopefully we can relate on that people bother you in the world too. They bother me as well. Sometimes they're in the checkout line. Sometimes they're on the road. Sometimes they're people I just try to avoid in life. And thankfully, we can just relate on that and admit that openly. But it's so counterintuitive what Jesus is asking us to do, to love our enemies. It's something that no one else in that day is expecting, teaching, let alone living. And the other thing that's crazy about this is how many of you guys like know Jesus' teaching enough to know that he says for us to love our enemies? Raise your hand. You're like, yeah, I know. I know Jesus says we're supposed to love our enemies, but what does he actually mean by that? And do I actually do that? Because I don't know. I don't really want to do that. But why is he bringing this up? Why is this something that he wants to press into us? If he's trying to help us understand God's love, he's trying to help us be the kind of people who know what his love is like and then say, go out and be like me, like this one feels bizarre. It does not feel intuitive. It doesn't feel like what's natural to us. And so we're going to walk through this conversation today, and I think there's a lot for us to get out of it. Even if we're familiar with it, we just need to stop and say, okay, Jesus expected that we would respond to this and live it out. What does that look like? Why is that important to him? And so the pathway we're going to walk through today is we're going to talk about love as defined by God, all right? There's a lot of ways we could define love, and we'll unpack that, but we want to actually understand what Jesus means when he says love your enemies. We want to get that right before we move on too far. And then we're also going to look at who I should love, because that's kind of the crux of the issue here. Like we're going to start, there's some people we want to love, and there's some people we really don't. And Jesus is really focusing on the people we don't want to love. And so we're going to unpack that about why, but also why Jesus cared about our enemies, why he cares for them, why he thinks like that's what he wants to finish his sermon on. That's like the end of the message, is he's like, I want you to understand, here's the grand finale, love your enemies. Why is he landing there? Why is he settling into that? How does that reveal what God is like? And then lastly, I want us to look at how to take practical steps toward love, because what's hard about this is we've heard it, right? But how do we do it? And you may get to the end of this and be like, that still doesn't sound very appealing, but there's something here that Jesus wants us to see, that if we will engage it, if we will trust him, and follow through with it and allow him to work in our own hearts, this is very much a part of understanding the kind of love that Jesus is here to redeem and restore. And so we're going to walk through that path today, and I hope we can stay dialed in and see what Jesus is revealing through this. So we're going to start with love, right? Because there's lots of ways we could define love. I think probably the way we're most used to using the word love is primarily as a feeling, right? We describe it in an emotional sense, right? Like there's things we prefer, there's things we like I like pizza. I love pizza. Actually, every week on Thursday night, me and my family, we go get pizza. It's a tradition. I work on the weekend, and so we kind of take our Sabbath on my day off on Friday, and we start it on Thursday night by going and getting pizza. And so we have frequented all of the pizza shops in Akron. We've experimented with recipes at home. It's like our tradition, and our 2, 4, and 6-year-old love it, and of course, even us as grown-ups, we love it. We do pizza and cookies every Thursday night. So we love pizza. we also love Star Wars in our house. And that's primarily started by me, but now that I have a 6-year-old, almost 7, like we've made it through all episodes 1 through 9. We've made it through Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. We've made it through Rogue One. We've like done it all. We just like geek out on Star Wars, and we love it. Like when my kids go to the library, do you want to know where they run? They're like, where's the Star Wars section? And they get like the encyclopedia, and that's what they take home. Like, I want to read this. All the Star Wars characters. I'm like, yeah, I'm so proud of you. I love you guys so much. And we just like love Star Wars. We geek out on it. We also use this in like a way of what we care about, right? So we love our family, right? We love our spouse, our kids. We love our community, like the people who are our people, who get us, like are part of our tribe. We're loyal to them, right? So we feel the emotion of that. Like there's a preference, there's an enjoyment, there's like a sense of, I'm gonna stick it through with you. And that's one sense of the way we use the word love. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's okay to like things and use it in that way. But only important for us to unpack it later, because there's another way we use this word that I think is a little bit more, it's a little bit more new in our culture. And the way that we'll sometimes use the word love is we'll think of it as agreement. And so we'll say things like, can you accept me? And we'll begin to actually base someone's love for us on if we can see eye to eye with them. And this is really tricky, that this is kind of a newer way of us viewing this, that you don't love me if you don't agree with me, or that I feel like you hate me if you don't agree with me. Because the reality is, like, there are so many human beings in this room and in this world, and I don't know if you've been around human beings very much, but most of us don't see eye to eye. And so we disagree all the time. And there's a danger here when we actually make this a part of our definition, and we start to see, I can't love someone I don't agree with. Or I don't think someone can love me who disagrees with me. Actually, that's really dangerous. That's very polarizing. I think that's why our culture can feel so polarized, is because we're actually changing the definition of love to mean something I don't think it was ever supposed to mean. I don't think that agreement is a part of that, but because we're hoping for that, we're looking for that, we're actually categorizing people as if we love them or they love us based upon agreement. It polarizes us because we just don't see eye to eye on everything. I certainly don't. I haven't found many, if any, people that I agree with everything on. And so this is kind of a part of maybe the cultural definition. Like we all kind of think in these ways, or we hear messages in this way. But what is biblical love? Actually, biblical love is called agape. So this is a Greek word. This is the word that Jesus is using when he says you're supposed to love your enemies. It's actually kind of the repeated word for love in the Bible. There's other Greek words. There's phileo love, right? You know, like Philadelphia, brotherly love. And so like people you like, phileo love's easy love. There's eros love, which is passionate love. And so it's that feeling, it's that emotion. But agape love's a little bit different. Agape love didn't actually have a very strong meaning. No one really used it, but Jesus started to use it. And so actually, where we start to understand what this word meant was by actually seeing how Jesus used it and how his disciples used it. The Bible actually becomes the way of knowing what this word means, is because the early church picked this up and they said, this is the kind of love that's like God. This is the kind of love that's like Jesus. And it wasn't primarily a feeling. It definitely was an agreement. The first part of this love was attitude, kind of a mindset. That as I went through the world and as I interacted with other human beings, I wasn't supposed to see them as nuisances and annoyances and inconveniences and people just in my way, or people to use or manipulate or get what I wanted out of life. No, like the attitude that agape love has is that I'm supposed to see people as objects of love. They're other human beings made in God's image of worth and value, and they're supposed to be an object of my love. And so as Jesus' early followers walked through life, as they lived out his teaching, they realized that everyone on this planet was meant to be an object of God's love. And so it started as an attitude, kind of as that mindset, but it didn't just stay there. It was an attitude with an action. And so if I saw people that way, if as I went through my day and as I interacted with my friends and family and neighbors and everyone, I was supposed to think about how I could act toward their good, how I could be generous and kind, that this agape love didn't just stop in theory, but it was lived out in day-to-day life. in the marketplace. It was lived out in the family. It was lived out in the communities. It was lived out with strangers and immigrants and different people groups. And it was supposed to be this kind of radical love that started with a way of how I viewed the world, how I viewed people as objects of love. And it manifested itself in active good deeds and service and loving one another. And so actually kind of the definition we get for this is that agape love is seeking the highest good of another. It's a mindset that I see you as deserving of that. I'm placed on this earth not just for me, but also for you. And I'm going to act on behalf of your good. I'm not going to work against you. I'm not going to try to tear you down. I'm not going to try to trap you. I'm not going to use you or manipulate you or just see you as in my way. But I want to participate in your story as well. And I want to be a part of the good in that story and not just pushing you out. So this is what agape love is. It's not a feeling. It's definitely not agreement. But it's this mindset, it's this attitude, and this action toward one another. And this becomes the theme of the Bible. Like, this is what God's like. He is love. He sees each of us. He sees every human being in history as an object of his love. As people he wants to move toward and pursue. And he acts on behalf of their good. It's what he does as he interacts with his people, as he participates in the world. He's being generous and kind. And we'll unpack that a little bit, how to see that and how God is doing that, because Jesus is very specific in how he sees that. But you'll read the Bible and you'll see love over and over and over again. While everyone's trying to argue about what the rules are and how to get the Jewish law right, and there's 613 Jewish laws, Jesus brings it down to this one thing, to love. A teacher of the law one time says, what's the most important commandment? He says it's to love. It's to love God. It's to agape God, and it's to agape others. Another way he says it is what we call the golden rule. And he says that we should love one another. We should agape one another as we want to be loved. Right? We should act for the good of others in the way that we hope that people seek our highest interest. They're acting on behalf of our good. They're not trying to use us or get by with us or just push us out of the way, but like we're working together. And this is the kind of love that Jesus is trying to bring us back to. It's the heart of God. And so while all that sounds great, and I don't think anyone argues about loving their neighbor, there was a lot of debate about who actually counts, right? Like if it's all about love, agape love, this attitude and this action, not this feeling and this agreement, there were still people that we don't want to love, right? There were people who we thought categorically, like, they thought, no way does God mean that I'm supposed to love them. It makes sense that I'm supposed to love my neighbor. It makes sense that I'm supposed to love my family. But like, there are people who maybe I can find the workaround with. Maybe I can find a loophole for. So it's important because Jesus is recognizing our human tendency to limit our love, right? We think, man, we can't possibly love everyone, or maybe it's not worth it if they're not going to love me back. And so Jesus is pressing into that. Hey, I know you're going to want to have some preference in who you live this out for, but I'm going to really push the boundaries on this. And so he says, you've heard the law that says love your neighbor and hate your enemy. He's starting to unpack their starting point. So what's their starting point, right? They have their Bibles. Actually, if you open up your Bible, you have something called the Old Testament. That was their Bible. That was all they had. If you open up to Leviticus, you're going to start to see what it meant to love your neighbor. And so this is what he's quoting from. Do not steal. Do not deceive or cheat one another. Do not bring shame on the name of your God by using it to swear falsely. I am the Lord. And there's a lot of things here. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not make your hired workers wait until the next day to receive their pay. Do not insult the deaf or cause the blind to stumble. You must fear your God. I am the Lord. Do not twist justice in legal matters by favoring the poor or being partial to the rich and powerful. Always judge people fairly. Don't spread slanderous gossip among your people. Don't stand idly by when your neighbor's life is threatened. I am the Lord. Don't nurse hatred in your heart for any of your relatives. Confront people directly so you won't be held guilty for their sin. And here's where we get to it. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So Jesus is speaking to something they knew. Right? This is what they learned in school. They're like, yeah, these are all the things. We're supposed to not be a cheat. Like if I have people who work for me, I have to pay them fairly. If someone's in trouble, I'm not supposed to stand idly by. I'm not supposed to spread gossip or slander people, especially the marginalized, like the deaf or the poor. I'm supposed to help them. I'm not supposed to have favoritism, especially in a court of justice. And so all of this, loving their neighbor, is about what? Their fellow Israelite. It's their tribe, right? Their community. Loving their neighbor, all of that played out in the people they did day-to-day life with, right? The people they bought from the marketplace with, the people who they shared land with, the people who they worked for, the people in their community, their tribe. And what Jesus is trying to help them see is that they've begun to drift away from that, not because they're not loving their neighbor, but because they've begun to pick something else up from this part of the Bible that's not even in there. Remember what Jesus said? He said, you have heard it said, love your neighbor, but what? Hate your enemy. Did you see that anywhere in there? It's not in there. So what is Jesus picking up on? He's picking up on what people have done with God's commands. They've said, okay, I'll love my neighbor, I'll love my tribe, but what about my enemy? What about people who aren't a part of my tribe? I don't view them that way. They actually aren't nationally a part of my tribe. The people who I don't see eye to eye with, the people who are in my way or against me. And what he's picking up on is not something that came from the Bible. He's picking up on something that people had assumed was okay. And I think we need to be very careful of that because we can do the same thing today. We can think, I'll love the people who are a part of my tribe, right? I'll love the people who see eye to eye with me, right? We start to kind of creep into the idea of love being a feeling or love being agreement. and we start to only live that way. And we start to infer that it must not be a big deal with God. But the heart of this idea of loving our neighbor is that it didn't just stay in the tribe. It was supposed to expand even to people who we didn't see eye to eye with, people who weren't like us. And Jesus is taking it there. Even though the idea of love isn't new to the Bible, it's all throughout it. The idea of loving your enemy is, at least directly, it's new. And so Jesus says, I say to you, love your enemies. Don't just love your neighbor. Love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you. What Jesus is saying, they'd never heard before. Why would you hear that before? That's insane. You really think about your real enemies. Do you see who their enemy is? It's those who persecute you. The Jewish people spent most of their existence as a nation being oppressed by someone else. For about 600 years, they were either oppressed by the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Babylonians, the Greek, the Romans. That's 3 times as long as we've been a nation as the United States. And they just lived that, having to be paying taxes to someone else, having to be ruled by someone else, being told to live and function in a way that they didn't want to live and function. And so when they're hearing Jesus say, love your enemy, pray for the one who persecutes you, they're thinking of Rome. They're thinking of the tax collectors who collected taxes for Rome and abandoned their community and worked against them and enabled the enemy. They're thinking of the people who persecuted them. They're thinking of the groups who worked against their cultural norms. They're thinking of the Samaritans. They're thinking of people outside their tribe. From persecution all the way down to just different. And what Jesus is calling them to love an enemy, right? Agape. To agape an enemy is to seek their highest good. I mean, that's not feel good, right? Like this isn't the feel good takeaway for today. This is really challenging to actively seek what is their best interest, not to change how you feel about them, not to say you agree with them. That's certainly not what Jesus is saying for the kind of the godless culture that ruled over them, but to see them, right attitude, as an object of love, and to act on behalf of their good. No one had ever said this before. To be a person of love to everyone, regardless of who they are or how they treat you. And at a minimum, that's to pray for them. Because it's hard to hate someone you're praying for. That's why we don't pray for our enemies. Because we don't want to think about them. We want to categorize them, push them into the extremes, create that story in our head that's like they are this and that and always this and never that. And we create this story in our head of what they're actually like. And at a minimum, to pray for them. The response of a disciple of Jesus whenever we experience persecution or wrongdoing is not just to be passive. It's not to take revenge. Pastor Brad talked about that last week. But it's to love them. To love without preference, whether they're a neighbor, a friend, or a stranger, or an enemy. And so this is radical. So we have this question, why does Jesus care about our enemies? It's one thing to say, like, I get it, like, God is love, the Bible's all about love, but, like, why is this the last thing? Why is this something that, of the 6 things he addresses, he wants to make sure we talk about this? Well, here's what he says. He says, if you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you're kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. Even people who don't know who God is, like non-Jews, even they are loyal to their tribe. Even the tax collectors look out for each other. So like all the people you hate, they do exactly what you do. And you're claiming to be different. You're claiming to be like God's special people. You're claiming to know love in a way that like no one else has ever known love before. And you're acting like everyone else does? This is important to Jesus because he knows we are supposed to be different. We are supposed to understand love differently than the rest of the world. We're not just supposed to look out for our own, but there's something deeper here. And it's not just difference for the sake of difference. It's because Jesus believes something changes us. That's why these topics are so hard. They hit at the very heart. But as Jesus hits all these things, murder, adultery, divorce, revenge, lying, your enemies, he knows he's hitting at the very heart. And if change can happen at the heart level, then we can begin to see change all around us. And so he's hitting on this idea of enemies, and he's hitting on the idea of something has to change. We have to be different. And what's going to change in us is understanding what God's love is like. And so he says this, right? He says, in that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. So it's interesting, right? Jesus is like observing all the same things that the people he's talking to observe, right? He's like, you guys know, you see like, the farmer over there, and they take care of their family. They're like kind to their workers. They contribute in the community. Like they're not a cheat. Like they are generous. And God gives them rain for their crops. And then you see the farmer over here who like takes advantage of people and doesn't give a rip about anyone and like cuts corners. And guess what God does? He gives him rain too. Jesus is observing, and he's saying, like, we all just, like, get to benefit from these gifts, right? Like, who can go to the beach? Who can go to the beach and enjoy the sun and enjoy the water? Only the good people get to go enjoy the beach because they deserve it. It's like, no, like, anyone can go. Like, the worst people in the world can go to the beach, and the best people in the world can go to the beach, you know? Like, he's observing something that's actually very normal to us. The sun, the rain, the fact that you're breathing right now. he's like, do you know that God gave that to you as a gift? You didn't do anything to earn that. Even if you're thinking right now about breathing, you're like, I'm breathing. Like, you're going to forget about that here in a minute, and you're going to still be breathing because God's sustaining you, and he wants to give you life as a gift. Even like when you don't do anything to deserve it, like, you get the sun, and he's just like, enjoy it. Like, it's just there to be warm. Enjoy it. It's a gift. These things that we view as maybe just normal, when we admit it, we didn't do anything to make the sun come up today. All we did was like go to bed and wake up. We didn't do anything to deserve breath. And Jesus says, this is just God being good. This is something he gave you. And he didn't give it based on preference. He didn't give it based upon how you acted yesterday. He chose to give you all these things for a new day because he's good. The book of Lamentations 3, it says that his mercies are new every morning. And you're like, how do I know that? Like, how's God being merciful? And it's like life, like the sun. He's merciful again today. And this is the worldview that Jesus has. Like, do you understand the things that we take for granted, the things that are just normal, the things that we think we somehow deserve and just should be there are everyday expressions of God saying, I love you, and will just act on your good, even if you don't think about me today. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to let you breathe. I'm going to give you the sun. I'm going to bring the rain. In Psalm 145, it says, the Lord is gracious and compassionate. He's slow to anger and rich in love. And it says, the Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. It's just pure grace. Now, one day God will bring all things to account, like he's a good judge as well, but now it's just pure grace. He just gives us all life. And so to act as his children, acting as true children, right? To be people who not only have experienced that kind of love and see the world as ways that God has been generous to us, but then to begin to see what Jesus was like and to be a part of this family, this kingdom, this whole community of people who are expressing God's love, his children. If you want to participate in that, if you want to become like Jesus, if you want to live that out, you're going to do that through agape. This is what it's all about. So in God's kingdom, I don't have the right to treat someone with unlove who Jesus has loved. And that's why he settles into this. He says, the reason I'm going to sit on your enemies is because I love your enemies, even if you don't. And he's good to them, just because that's what he's like. Not because he agrees with them, not because it's just exciting or he prefers it. He sees the world, he sees us as objects of his love. And he's good just because he is. And this is what Jesus does, right? When Jesus spends his time here on earth, he doesn't just say, wouldn't it be great if we all just loved our enemies? No, he goes and finds the tax collector who everyone hated, and he's like, let's get lunch together. And people are like, Jesus, don't ask that guy out to lunch. Don't you know what you're doing? He interacts with the Samaritan woman at the well. He heals the daughter of a Roman centurion. He goes to the oppressor and he says, I'm going to heal. I'm going to bless. I'm going to share a meal with you. I'm not going to push you out. I'm going to draw you in. I want to see just as much good in your life as my own. Jesus lives this out. He lives this out to the point that all the people he's talking to who are listening and oh yeah, okay, love your enemies. God is love. We're supposed to be salt and light. All those people who are listening to him, not much later, will be watching him on a cross. And Jesus is going to be hanging there. And he's going to say, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they do. Jesus agapes, he loves to the fullest extent He doesn't just talk about it. He doesn't just idealize it. He says, no, this is the gospel. This is the only good news for the world. That when we're his enemy, right? When we're listening, we're hearing his teaching, and then all of a sudden, God's laying his life down, and we step aside, and we're silent. We let God take the hit, you know? He says, I'm going to lay my life down in that moment. We see this actually play out later in the Bible. In the book of Romans, it says this, that when we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time, and he died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who's especially good. It's noble to lay your life down for someone. But here's what's interesting about Jesus. You know, God shows his great agape for us by sending Christ to die while we were still sinners. So while we're not interested in him, while we're not agreeing with him, while we don't like him, he chooses to see us as an object of love and send his son to act on behalf of our good, even when we don't deserve it, even when we're not aware of it. For since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his son, while we were still his enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of his son. Enemies becoming friends. That's not a liking thing, that's a relational change. What had the power to help the people in this room, and myself included, what has the power to help us not be an enemy of God is the fact that he loves us when we are his enemies. Does that make sense? Isn't that bizarre? That the very thing that allows us to be friends of God is because he made the move when we were his enemies. It says that we can now rejoice in our wonderful new relationship with God because our Lord Jesus Christ, he has made us friends of God. He's changed the relationship. And so it doesn't matter if you completely rebelled against God and were shaking your fist at him and, it doesn't matter if you just didn't know and weren't really interested and were just kind of nominal. He moved towards you in your indifference. He chose to act even when you weren't interested. And that's what changed our relationship with him. So now do you see? Do you see why loving your enemy is like the big grand finale? Because like this is what God has done for us. So what do we do with that, right? Like it's amazing. Like this is the gospel. This is what Jesus has done. Like this is the whole point. This is the final love challenge. He's like, do you see that God has loved you when you were his enemy? He sent his son. He lands in kind of an odd spot because he says, you're to be perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect. So let me rescue this one on a little bit because this idea of something being perfect is actually the idea of it being complete. It's the word teleos, and it's the idea that you cross the finish line. You like hit a milestone, right? And something's completed. And so if you read it that way, you're to be complete even as your Father in heaven is complete, or your love is to be complete, or your love's to be perfect. Do you see what he's trying to say here? At the end of this whole like conversation on what love is, he's saying, so now you know. Now you know how complete your God's love is for you. And so you should do this. You should do this. Because you've experienced this and God has acted this way toward you, you should complete that love. You should model that for the other human beings around you. Because that's what God desires. He desires his love and his message and his hope to go throughout the world through people. And so we've been sent because of what we've experienced. I wrote down, human beings are never more like God than in moments of true love. not agreeing with each other, not liking each other and having emotional feelings. Not just that, because there's people we know who it's not going to work out that way. But a mindset, an attitude that they are objects of our love. They're deserving of love because Jesus loves them. And then to still act on behalf of their good. Nothing is participating more in the heartbeat of God than loving an enemy. And so Jesus lands here as his big grand finale that regardless of who someone is or what they have done, to show them an act of kindness and generosity to seek the highest good in their life. And you know what's crazy? You know what's crazy about this? Like, we all raised our hands because we're like, we've heard about loving your enemy. This actually isn't news to our culture. Like, there have been many times where people have championed reform or have brought this idea of loving your enemy. Actually, there's probably one icon we can think of in our culture, kind of in our slice of time, in our slice of history, where this idea of loving your enemy was a big deal. Like, it was actually lived out. And we like name streets and schools after this person. And it's Martin Luther King Jr., right? And he brought this to a level kind of into our culture in a way that everyone responded to. People began to respond to. And one point he said this about hate. He said, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Now again, anyone can take this and they can push their own definition of love into it and be like, this is why you need to agree with me. But that's not what has the power to change the world. What has the power to change the world is the gospel. It's agape love. And with the right definition of love, he's exactly right. This is what Jesus is saying. Like, the world will be no different. It will not know God's love anymore if hate just multiplies hate. The only thing that can change that is agape love. You choosing to love your enemy. The same way that light penetrates darkness. It's like that's another metaphor from the Bible for what Jesus did or something. And so our culture knows, our world wants this. We just don't know how to get it. It's because only God can. Agape love does have the power to transform the world. So practically, what does that look like? The starting point for all this is actually you have to identify your enemy. Don't just make a list of the people you hate, although that might be fun. We were talking about this with our team this week, and someone in the meeting said, it's kind of like the best way to answer this question is saying, who do you think life would be better without? Who do you think life would be better without? And that might be kind of in a joking way. You might not ever say that out loud. Don't say that ever out loud. But for real, when you think about your week, when you think about your story, like, who do you think life would be better without? Hate shows itself in many different forms. It doesn't always show itself in persecution, but at the heart level, I think that's pretty close to someone being your enemy, that you wish they weren't here, that your life would be better without them. What a bother that God put them near you. Now again, there's real persecution, there's real hurt, there's real pain. I'm not trying to undermine any of that, but sometimes, at least when I hear this conversation, I'm so used to it. And I'm like, I don't have any enemies. I'm like, this isn't a Marvel movie. I don't have like an arch nemesis. But there are people who I wish life was better without. And I get into that mindset where I begin to categorize them in ways that I think that they don't deserve my love. They don't deserve for me to see them that way or for me to act toward them in that way. The second thing, actually, Jesus just says this. He says, pray for them. Pray for God to work for their good. Don't just pray that they would agree with you. Don't just pray that you would start liking them. Pray agape love. Pray that you would see them the way God sees them, as an object of love. Start there. Pray that you would understand like what they actually need in their life. And don't just hold on to that. If you land somewhere and you're like, man, God's beginning to show me like actually more about this person, or he's giving me just insight or empathy, you don't just stop there. I would encourage you to act on that. And actually, if you're willing to like do this weekend, you're willing to open yourself up to this, like I would encourage you to have one act of goodness by Monday. You'll be lucky to still be praying for your enemy by Monday, but like if in this moment you can identify that and you can actually open your heart up to say, God, I want to be transformed by your love. I know this is crazy. This is insane. Like, what kind of people gather together on the weekend to be like, how can we love our enemies better? Like, you're here doing that. It's insane. And you are participating in the very good news of Jesus Christ, in the kind of love that God showed toward us. That might be a coworker. It might be your boss. So like you go in Monday, and you're like, man, how can I act on their good? I know they don't deserve it. They didn't do anything last week to deserve it, but how can I act on behalf of their good? It might be a family member who's either estranged or there's tension. They might not even be in near proximity, but could you reach out to them? Not even to accomplish anything, just to move toward them like the way God does. It may be a whole group of people that you've categorized as the enemy. Would you seek someone out in that group you've categorized, and would you just listen to them? Not to change them, not to even start liking them, but just to move toward them. And what I've found as I began to do this, it actually becomes a little bit easier. Me and my wife, Sarah, we were in some counseling earlier this year, and what this counselor was helping us do was helping us understand what the process of forgiveness looks like in a healing way. And actually, she had us do all this stuff. It was crazy. We identified some hurt, some areas, some people we think life would be better without. Wouldn't have worded it that way. But real things. And we began to be honest about that. Yeah, really, this is how I see it. This is where the hurt's at. Began to even like a deeper part of that, seeing like this is broken, like this, it shouldn't be this way, and to have an even deeper understanding and feeling toward that brokenness. But what was interesting in that process as she helped us go through that was this idea of praying for our enemies. And as we prayed, we began to see the brokenness in a new way. We were honest, we hurt, we grieved, but then something changed. We began to see people the way God sees them. Not just as people who are in our way, who would let us down, but they're an object of God's love. And they actually have their own pain. And they have their own hurts. And it was amazing just through this idea of identifying and praying, and then what I was compelled to do once I began to see them that way, once I began to see the hurt and to begin to see them the way God sees it, I remember like walking out of counseling in that time and telling Sarah, I was like, we got to find a way to serve them this week. Like how can, instead of me just always holding on to all the ways they had let me down or all the way, like I began to think like, I'm here to like love them. And I'm sitting here like with my arms crossed, pouting, and God's called me to see them differently and act toward them differently despite what they do. Guys, this can be incredibly healing. I'm not saying you won't have any enemies anymore, or that we'll all just get along and all agree, or that you'll like everyone you don't like. I'm saying that you begin to experience God's transforming love in a real way when you let him do this. His love becomes complete in you. You don't arrive, but you experience his love in a way most people will never open themselves up to. And that's Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. That's what he expected us to do. Not to earn God's favor, but to experience his love, because it's what God's love is actually like toward us. I want to invite the band out and give us some space to pray even now. Father, just thank you for your love. Thank you that even when we don't get it and we kind of lose the heart and intent behind your word, you still move toward us. You still act on behalf of our good. You're still a generous God. And most of all, God, thank you for the person of Jesus, that when we were uninterested in you, when we were ugly toward you, when we crucified you, you moved toward us. You saw us as an object of your love, and you continually act on behalf of our good. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for how gentle you are with us. Thank you that you've turned enemies into your friends. You've created a new way and a new relationship. I just pray that if there's something you want to do in the hearts of someone this weekend, God, like if you want them to understand your love and you want them to engage this difficult process of loving their enemies, God, give them the grace and the courage to do that. Thank you that you went first and we're not alone. As we do that, God, I pray that we would experience your love in deeper and fresh ways, because you are active now and you are powerful even in this moment. And so we trust you in all things. In Jesus' name, amen.
Try my best, but still I fail. Sing your mercy. It triumphs over judgment of life and horizons, stronger than all sin, and more your kindness. It leads us to God, hear our prayers there. That we are asking for your heart. And in order to do that, we realize that we've got to surrender ours to you. And in its entirety, not just the easy parts that we can give, but the stuff we're ashamed of, the hurts that we hide, our brokenness, the grudges that we've held. God, we give those to you. It's hard. We give them to you, though. And we trust and we know that you're strong enough to carry those, that we're not meant to carry those. God, teach us surrender. We know it's supposed to hurt a little bit. But God, we give them to you because we trust you. And you've been faithful to us. And you continue to. Let's just make this our prayer again. One last time, let's sing, All to Jesus I Surrender. And all to Jesus I surrender. All to him I freely give. I will ever love and trust in his presence daily. One last time. All to Jesus I surrender. Love you guys. If you want to talk, if you want to pray, we'll be right here. We'd love to do that with you. If you're new, we've got gift bags. We'd love for you to take one. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. See you soon.